to Blaze News, the mandate day 46. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, in a shocking move, President Trump pulled Elise Stefanik's nomination for U.S. ambassador to the UN. Taking to Truth Social, Trump explained that taking Stefanik out of Congress was eating away at the already razor-thin Republican majority in the House. However, Trump did say that he looks forward to the day when Stefanik can finally join his cabinet. A top MS-13 member was arrested in Woodbridge, Virginia. The FBI leader said that illegally immigrated to the United States from El Salvador. And Attorney General Pam Bondi detailed this leader's arrest. Watch.
Early this morning, one of the top leaders of MS-13 was apprehended. He was the leader for the East Coast, one of the top 3 in the entire country. Right here in Virginia, living half an hour outside of Washington, D.C. He is an illegal alien from El Salvador, and he will not be living in our country much longer.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem toured El Salvador's Terrorism Confinement Center and came face-to-face with members of the alleged Tren de Aragua members. Now, Noem used this opportunity to deliver this PSA to illegal alien criminals. Watch.
I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use.
United Auto Workers praised Donald Trump's new 25% tariffs on auto imports, saying they will end the free trade disaster that has devastated working class communities for decades. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt spoke to reporters about these tariffs, and here's what she had to say.
And I would just like to emphasize these auto tariffs yesterday are a big deal for auto workers in the industry. And you saw the United Auto Workers Union, Sean Fain, who wasn't the greatest fan of the president on the campaign trail, came out this morning and applauded the president for this move, saying it's a great thing for auto workers who have been sold out by unfair trade practices.
RFK Jr. is reportedly planning to cut 10,000 jobs in a major restructuring of health and human services spread across departments that respond to disease outbreaks, approve new drugs, and provide insurance for the poorest Americans. RFK issued a video statement that Americans' health can come at a much lower price tag. Watch.
We're going to eliminate an entire alphabet soup of departments and agencies while preserving their core functions by merging them into a new organization called the Administration for a Healthy America, or AHA. We have 2 goals. The first is obvious, to save the taxpayer money by making our department more efficient. And the second is to radically improve our quality of service.
I love that AHA is now going to go along with MAHA. It just makes so much sense. Finally, the White House hosted a podcast row where cabinet members spoke with podcast hosts about President Trump and his agenda. And BlazeTV's own Sara Gonzales is there right now today. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt detailed the event in a video on X.
Hey everybody, today is Podcast Row here at the White House, and our team has gathered a room full of podcasters with cabinet officials, White House officials who are talking to them about the president and his agenda. And I bet you the people in that room have much more viewers than CNN and the legacy media. Just saying, we're proud to welcome them to the White House.
Let's bring in Blaze News editor-in-chief Matthew Peterson. Let's start with Podcast Row. I like that. I like that our Sara Gonzales is out there in D.C. right now, taking that fiery spirit to the swamp.
Yeah, look, Podcast Row, I mean, like the sound of that, right? Anyone in this industry on the right would. But this is really a new era. They really are putting their money where their mouth is. They're doing the thing that we've known needs to be done for a long time in media, and just reaching out to the right people and bringing them in to cover and give them access, right, to some of the highest ranking officials in the country. So Sara took a picture of herself with RFK. We saw that today. I wonder what that could mean. There may be some interviews coming out from Sara. She really deserves all the hard work she's done in this world. She deserves this. And this is the new dispensation. This is the new White House. They're actively reaching out and bringing in people who are not the usual corrupt legacy media.
I love that this administration isn't just taking this for granted, doing the same old things, the status quo, that they're looking at something like a podcast row, that they're saying, you know what, AP, if you don't go along with Gulf of America or whatever else we've said, you're not going to have the access that you necessarily normally had before. This is a new day here. They have the new seat there in the White House press briefing room. They are looking at media in a completely different way, which was much needed.
Yeah, and we know because we've been there talking to them and together as well, and we see this. I mean, these are people who understand what needs to happen. You have to break the cartel's monopoly over access to federal power. So the way it works is, never tire of saying it, New York Times, Washington Post, right? They have access to various officials at various agencies, especially in the deep state, the administrative state, forever, for decades. Going back to, as Jason said, Buttrell the other day, going back to the fact that they've also been co-opted by some of those agencies for decades and manipulated by those agencies for decades. So in this case, you have to do exactly what they're doing, which is to go out and give out the invites and bring people in who are going to bring a new view and a new window to audiences everywhere, and that's the only way, right, to break power. The reason these people have power in mainstream media is because they are given it by elites in position, and that has to end, and it is ending.
Let's talk about the Elise Stefanik story, because Donald Trump, if we're going to use a baseball analogy, right, that's just starting now, they were going to pull her up to the major leagues, which is what they think in Congress, that, oh my gosh, I'm going to get an ambassadorship. This is it, right? It's going to be a huge deal. Well, guess what? Things aren't going as well as they would like. There's a very close race right now in Florida 6, Mike Waltz's district. He's already with NSA, so his seat isn't exactly secure right now. Randy Fine is running for that seat, but it's a little too close for comfort right now to just say, okay, Elise, you have been called up. You can go ahead and take on the UN ambassadorship.
Yeah, I mean, this is an obvious reason to say, nope, actually, wait a minute. We need you here because this is razor thin, and they just experienced this, right? I mean, they just saw, we'll be talking with Chris Bedford about it a little later. They just saw how close this can be and how, you don't get everyone. There's always some irascible grumps who aren't going to go the right way, or I'm going to stand with this one on principle. So you need every vote you can get. But it's also sort of a twofer in my mind, because if you are more new right, sort of my own bias, that's where I'm at. Stefanik is a little too normie. I mean, she's well liked. I don't think any ill of her at all. But I don't know how forward thinking she is when it comes to sort of the Trumpian agenda moving forward. So I'm actually really curious about the possibilities this opens up.
On the Trump tariffs, we see the auto workers and distillers are out in full force saying, Donald Trump, we love it. We love that the business is coming back to America. Again, I think you and I on the wine front have a little different opinion. But at least for the auto workers, we are all in agreement that you can go through and make things better for the American people and the American workers.
It's the Aperol Spritz.
It is. It's the Aperol Spritz talking. That's it.
Look, I feel as if this is one of the most important things that people don't talk about enough. Actually establishing, people have talked about this, the populist right will get with the unions and everything will be fine. And the problem is the big national unions they were completely gone. I mean, they were like woke crazy. Unions got corrupt a long time ago, and they were not the thing. They became a thing that was different than what you thought, right? That was not like a bunch of workers getting together against their bosses, to protect themselves. There's a whole corrupt problem with unions in general. But here, when you talk about the auto workers praising Trump and the tariffs, that is a sign of potentially a new alliance that needs to be lasting politically. We need to just take those people, those are Trump people, and they should be Trump people in terms of what they believe and what they want to vote for. And we need to make that alliance real. And this is a great step in the right direction.
If we could just carve out, because 2 of the 3 parts of an Aperol Spritz are Italian. I'm just saying, the club soda is the only part that I can get here in the United States. So we're going to need some exceptions if we're going to continue on here.
Help Jill get through the summer,
It's going to be Aperol Spritz.
Look, if we have to,
for
the sake of America and American jobs, it can cost a little more, right?
It can cost a little more. You know what? That's what it's going to be, and we're going to be okay with it. We're going to power through. When we come back, Chris Bedford will tell us the tale of Chuck Schumer powering through with his political survival. Just ahead. Well, Good Ranchers doesn't need to worry about tariffs because they're all 100% American made. But you know what? You do look at the 140,000 family farms that have shut down in the United States. And that's because a lot of the meat in grocery stores isn't actually coming from American farms. It is imported from overseas because they care about all the mass production and low cost. But this spring, we need to change all that because it's time to spring into action and put American farms first, because we do know nothing beats American quality. And that's why I choose GoodRanchers.com, because they stand for integrity, tradition, and 100% American raised meat. And all products on GoodRanchers.com have trustworthy ingredients because we know that their meat is born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States. So you know exactly where it comes from. And it doesn't have any of the junk in it. There's no antibiotics, there's no hormones or seed oils. It's just one simple ingredient, and that's meat. Good Ranchers delivers straight to your door, offering you the true farm-to-table transparency, so you're supporting American ranchers and getting meat that you can feel good about serving. It's all clean and simple, exactly the way it should be. And you can skip the grocery store. Right now, Good Ranchers is running their Spring into Action promotion, so when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you get to decide if you want free chicken nuggets that have no seed oil in them, free bacon, ground beef, or salmon in every order for a year. Just be sure to use my code Jill at checkout and get $40 off your first order. It's the best deal that they've ever done. So spring into action and help American farmers with every purchase. Visit GoodRanchers.com now, and remember, use my code Jill for free meat for a year and $40 off. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. After days of chaos in Congress and fierce infighting over the continuing resolution, one man somehow emerged relatively unscathed. That's Chuck Schumer. While the House Republicans had all the spotlight on them, Senate Minority Leader managed to dodge blame and hold his coalition together. So how was he able to pull all this off? Blaze Media senior politics editor Chris Bedford is here to break it all down for us. So Bedford, Chuck Schumer, he's one of the guys that we love to hate on this show, right? So how did he come out of this PR nightmare with barely a scratch on him?
Well, the good news for Chuck Schumer is he works in the Senate. And the Senate is a place that doesn't really actually like to do anything. Now, it's got a great reputation in general for being the cooling chamber of democracy, but people kind of take that to an extreme where they just inertia. There's a complete and total lack of inertia. There's a lack of movement. Chuck Schumer essentially survives physics, where a motionless object will not be put in motion unless some other force is brought against it. So you have to look at this and say, well, who is the force that could be brought against Chuck Schumer? We know that the base is angry, the Democratic base. We see them at Bernie Sanders and AOC's rallies around the country chanting that Chuck Schumer's got to go. But the base isn't in the Senate. In fact, one of their most vocal members, Bernie Sanders, when asked about AOC primary and Chuck Schumer, which is a real threat to him, much more than losing his leadership position, just this weekend left the room. He stormed out of the interview angrily. This shows you, by the way, what kind of heat liberal Democrats are used to taking from the press. Where asked a very basic question about elections, he storms off the set. It's kind of funny whenever you see people actually ask questions on the Democratic side. But if you look, so let's take the case of Mitch McConnell, and I read about this in tomorrow's Beltway brief as an example of this. Here's someone who has been one of the most unpopular politicians in America year after year for a long time. The Republican base doesn't like him. He's been primaried before by Matt Bevin. I think that was 2014. He has senators openly complaining about him. Unlike Chuck Schumer, you got Mike Lee complaining about him. Rick Scott ran a leadership race against him. But nothing happened because the people who are most likely to replace him are his allies, including the one who eventually did, John Thune. The people who would want to mess with him are aware of how much money he has and how much money he's able to spend in that power and how he's able to cut you off the way he cut Senator Ted Cruz off in his reelection, even when they started to get close because of past criticism. So when you're sitting there as a Democrat side and you're realizing that the incredibly unpopular, for years, Mitch McConnell literally had to stroke out multiple times on TV before he took himself out of the equation with a 9-month runway and then stepped aside. You're looking at the Schumer fight saying, well, that's not for us. We don't know who's going to replace him. It's going to be Dick Durbin or someone. Who cares? It's not going to make any difference. And the chaos that it could cause is not worthwhile. A primary fight, however, though, that's a different story.
So, Chris, before I came to Blaze, I spent a little bit of time talking to those senators who are upset with McConnell, and hovering with them a little bit in the corner, once or twice. And it was an interesting dynamic because they were sort of stuck right on the Republican side, but they wanted to create an alternative group that would push against McConnell. When you look at the Democrat side, as you alluded to a few minutes ago, you said, well, they don't really come out and say anything, right? They're quiet. They're not going out there and talking about it. But surely some of them behind closed doors are. Is it equivalent to what you saw on the right in the last few years with, Lee and Cruz and the boys sort of developing this alternative bench and ecosystem? Does that exist on the Democratic side, even quietly, or not?
So the Democrats actually kind of deal with these internal problems in the Senate in maybe a more healthy way than Republicans do. Both caucuses meet 3 times a week when they're in session for lunches. In the Republican session, it's extremely tightly controlled. You speak when leadership calls on you. It makes news even though it's off the record. If you speak out without leadership picking you, it's all very ordered. Whereas the Democrat side is basically like a family reunion 3 times a week, an airing of grievances. If you're a reporter outside that door, sometimes you can hear the senators yelling. Anyone's allowed to chime in. Anyone's allowed to yell at each other, insult each other, say why they're ticked off at each other, say why Schumer sucks and this and that. And then they get it out of their system and they walk out that door as a unified conference that's not actually willing to do that. Now, if Schumer continues to push this, and he continues to not play the game. And by the game, I mean being better at pretending that you're opposing the president, even if you don't actually have the power to do so. Something Republicans were great at under Democratic presidents to fool their own voters. If he doesn't start pretending, then yeah, you'll see some of the more progressive members of the Senate, while not able to replace him, able to actually be a block on anything that he wants to do, particularly if he ever makes it into the majority. So right now, Republicans only need a couple of Democrats per cloture vote, where they have to get to 60 to get them over that hurdle. You're never going to get the progressives over that hurdle. You're never going to get them to agree to this sort of thing. So that progressive caucus wouldn't have any power. But if you got Chuck Schumer back with a slim majority, then a combination of Chris Murphy, Bernie Sanders, whoever else, Liz Warren, getting together and saying, you got to deal with us, you got to deal with us as a bloc, that's a possibility.
Well, let's get to the big news from the Trump administration, because Elise Stefanik, she was part of the House leadership team for the GOP. When Trump came into office, he said, congratulations, you're going to be our UN ambassador. But the news today is changed, because she's no longer going to be the ambassador for the UN, because we have a razor thin majority in the House. So she's going to remain where she is. So is this the right move from the Trump administration?
I don't know why it took so long. I mean, I understand. She's got to be disappointed. I mean, being able to go down there and yell at the United Nations, well, kind of a pointless job, is one that has been a platform for raising people's profiles. You get to give a big speech where you condemn them. I mean, Nikki Haley was almost able to sound interesting when she was a UN ambassador. The whole point of the United Nations, by the way, in New York, is just so we can get foreign diplomats and leaders liquored up, hookered up, and on tape and video, and then go back to them later and say, hey, we need a favor because we saw you with 6 prostitutes in your hotel room and a pile of coke, and your wife wouldn't want to see that. So the UN ambassador is like kind of a fake thing. It's just for lecturing them in between. But it is an important stepping stool. It's a cool thing on your resume. I get that's why a lot of Republicans go to Congress. You could justify having a painting of yourself that's handed down, but once you become UN ambassador, she's got to be disappointed. But this was obvious from the very beginning. I'm sitting here wondering, did Elon Musk fire the person in charge of counting the House of Representatives votes? Why did it take so long for them to realize they cannot possibly get anything done? And maybe it's because they didn't expect to have so much trouble from Republicans. Like we got Massey, which means you can only lose no other votes, essentially. It puts congressmen like Chip Roy, who kind of make their reputation on being someone who votes no, in a bad spot to constantly have to vote yes. Elise Stefanik is a more moderate person from New York. She'll be able to go along. And I think it just comes down to the reality of giving the Republicans more breathing room, particularly for this upcoming budget battle, which is expected in the next few weeks.
So, and I couldn't agree more. You should write a column based on the words you just uttered about the UN. That's exactly right. And if you are on the right, you do get to go and yell at them, which does make you cool, like you said, even Nikki Haley. So my take on this is also Stefanik was sort of chosen. If you're in the transition, assuming there is some kind of plan, which there was, with people working on it, you got to sprinkle things around, right? And Stefanik is someone who'd be known more, like you said, as more moderate, more of a neocon. But hey, I mean, she's maybe even less of that than Haley, and Haley had the position, so you can give her that position. And if you're coming from where I'm from, or you're more new right kind of person, you're like, I'm okay with maybe giving her that because it doesn't really matter. Who gets it now? I mean, now it opens up. Now this is really interesting because, as you said, it is an interesting stepping stone. And getting rid of her, now all of a sudden you kind of set the bar with someone who is more moderate, right? So who gets it now?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, you could pick from a far field. You don't have to pick from within the government. Well, his tenure was actually not as interesting as you would have expected it. For example, Ronald Reagan's first UN secretary was Bill Buckley. Mm-hmm. I mean, that kind of thing could be fun. Why don't we pick you, Matt, to go down there to the UN? We actually need you here, but I mean, I would come up and visit you down there, and you get to yell at them. It's like, they always say the Speaker of the House doesn't actually have to be picked from the Congress, but they always will be. It's different with the United Nations ambassador. It's a good way, and it's to raise someone's profile, to do a big favor, put them in a position where they're not going to actually cause you any trouble. So I think maybe look at maybe Ron DeSantis, someone who is not necessarily a Trump ally, but it'd be good to get them on the team, but at the same time kind of sideline them a little bit. Those are some of the choices that are up. And of course, they've got to kind of keep Ron DeSantis a little bit on deck and make sure that Pete Hegseth doesn't make any more big mistakes.
Well, you were foreshadowing, right? This is for the big, beautiful bill that they want to get passed. But when you look at Trump's agenda overall and his mandate, if you will, what do you think this signifies in where he wants to get things done? Because there is still so much on the table for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, everything they've been doing is through executive action. The Congress, which was they hoped would be able to pass something on the border bill and immigration very quickly out the gate, hasn't passed anything. Mm-hmm. I mean, they pat themselves on the back for the continuing resolution that stopped a government shutdown. That's literally all they've done, except for confirmations. Confirmations have been sailing smoothly. And interestingly enough, as this Stefanik episode illustrates, well, a lot of the really contentious ones are out of the way. There are still a number of nominations that are still ongoing. They're still staffing up the administration in general. So other than that, no, Congress hasn't done anything. And there's only so much the executive can do before that stuff needs to be codified. And these guys need to do their jobs, and they need to stop worrying about reelect and actually just do it. I mean, if you look at the Senate, for example, the House has now had a budget for weeks and weeks. Jason Smith, to his credit, has been an absolute workhorse in putting this stuff together. The House Freedom Caucus finally pushed them to everyone to release their budgets and hashed out when they released theirs first. You look at the Senate, and everyone's just looking at their hands. I mean, I read through their budget a week or two ago, and it's just basically a fill-in-the-blank spreadsheet. Nothing has actually been hammered out, which does make me think that the House Representatives version, which is at least, say what you will, is at least it's a version, is going to probably prevail in this coming battle.
Yeah, I mean, this does indicate, though, I mean, this is going to be a tightly run thing, right? And I mean, or it has to be going into the final stretches. And that's what has me a little alarmed. I mean, like you said, who's doing the counting here? There's very little room for error, no? Or is that too hardcore of a view?
There's very little room for error. And Rand Paul is probably a no. Mike Lee could be brought around, but right now is kind of a no. He's actually, I think, more reasonable. But, a lot of Mike Lee's staff are right now very much like the senator himself. Very wonky, very nerdy, very into the numbers, and they don't have quite the political talent that they've always had for being able to navigate some of these things and negotiate some of these things. Rich Scott's been talking a big game, but I suspect he would actually come around and vote for whatever budget this is. Now, you only need 51 after you get through cloture to actually get this budget over. So that would allow 2 Republican senators to say, hold their nose and say, no, we're not doing this. Everyone else to just groan. And the question is this a fight that is worth picking? Rand Paul, he probably has already decided that it's a fight worth picking. But Mike Lee and Rick Scott, I think those are 2 who could be brought into the fold. Ron Johnson as well. After the meetings this week, everybody left going different directions, disgruntled and angry. And then you've got the majority leader Thune saying, well, we're going to get something on the table by Easter. And then the next day he said, actually, let's do it next week. We'll get something out next week. We'll see. I didn't expect this. I let my congressional reporter take a vacation to Japan, so I really didn't expect this. But it looks like we'll just have to be working later and keeping up with it to try to track it down for you and the readers.
Well, way to go. I'm going to expect you, Chris, to start a kumbaya session out there in D.C., and you're going to get it all done. I have complete and total faith in you that you can get this done.
I can do. As soon as I come back from some skiing in Maine, I will get right to it.
You know what? As soon as that happens, all right, we'll see you then. Thanks, Bedford.
See you then.
Former Trump lawyer John Eastman will detail his ongoing battle with all the leftist courts out there in California. Stay tuned. The legal attacks on anyone connected to Donald Trump continue, and this time they're targeting constitutional scholar and former Trump attorney John Eastman. A California state bar court just recommended disbarring Eastman over his efforts to challenge the 2020 election, citing 10 disciplinary charges. But is this really about ethics, or is this just another political hit job? John Eastman joins us now to break it all down. So, John, what are they trying to say this time, right? What grounds is this court actually trying to get you disbarred?
Well, let me kind of lay the groundwork. The trial judge in the California Bar Court nearly a year ago, actually a year ago just this week, recommended disbarment, and it took us a whole year to get before the Bar Court of Appeals. And the hearing last week was before the 3-judge panel of the Court of Appeals. But the bar attorneys are continuing to say that I lied, that there was no evidence of fraud or illegality in the election, and therefore, because I said there was, I should be disbarred. Not only on the 10 counts that the trial judge recommended disbarment for, but the insurrection count that they lost and are appealing that. This is really astounding. The Democrats have challenged almost every election in my lifetime, making false statements about ballots and vote suppression and what have you. None of them have been disbarred. This is an overtly political case, and it's being presided over by overtly political judges who continue to donate to Democrat candidates even while they're on the bench. We've got a serious problem in our country if you're not allowed to speak up against illegality in elections that we all saw with our own eyes.
Yeah. So what are the next steps here?
So the appellate division has 3 months to issue a ruling. They could either reaffirm the recommendation for disbarment, or they could overturn that recommendation and recommend either something less than disbarment, such as suspension, or recommend that no sanctions and culpability exist at all. Either way, I suspect we'll be before the California Supreme Court, which is the only authority that has the ability to impose any discipline. And if there is some discipline recommended by the appellate panel, only the California Supreme Court can impose it if they agree. And we'll fight it vigorously there as well if need be. One hopes the appellate division will see this case for what it is, a case that never should have been brought. It's about contested issues of the election and hotly contested and open questions of constitutional law that even the state's own experts admitted were murky questions and unresolved. That should have ended the case right there, because you can't be disciplined for taking one side or the other of an unresolved and open question of constitutional law.
Now, John, this is a kind of, cutting edge in the bad sense sort of case, I take it. I mean, this is somewhat unprecedented. This sort of thing doesn't usually happen. I'm curious, though, is this, they're going to use this as an example, right, if it wasn't checked, to do this to many other people. Is that happening?
Well, it is happening. And look, the people that brought the bar complaint, a group called the States United Democracy Center, was also hired by the Attorney General in Arizona to prepare the prosecution memo against the Trump electors and ultimately against me as well. This is a virulently anti-Trump group. Hiring them to do the prosecution strategy is like hiring a fox to prepare the safety memo for your chicken coop. It's just insane. But this is what they're doing. Another group called the 65 Project makes very clear their goal is not just to get everybody disbarred, but to make them so toxic in their firms and their communities that lawyers won't want to take on these kind of cases again. And it's not just the election challenges, it's any case that challenge the narrative coming out of the government that you want to speak back against, whether it's the boys playing in girls' sports or middle-aged men exposing themselves in your daughter's public pool locker rooms or whatever it is. They're trying to silence and cower attorneys from taking on those cases that challenge the progressive leftist mindset. We can't have an adversarial system of justice if they succeed in that, which is one of the reasons I'm fighting so hard against it.
Yeah, and what we're talking about here is just all the precedent that could be set in going forward. But when we look at this, somebody like you or anybody else that wants to take up cases like this and wants to just even go through and speak out against wrongdoings that they see, what legal advocacy do you see that they're trying to impose going forward just to make sure that you will be made an example of, essentially, in this case?
Well, and you compare it to the leftist outrage against President Trump sanctioning law firms that engaged in the biggest political scandal in American history, the Russia hoax, laundering millions of dollars from the Hillary Clinton campaign to pay foreign spies, including a Russian agent, to create this false story that they then used to spy on the president's campaign. So he's going after them, and the left's reaction to that has just been priceless. How dare you go after law firms and lawyers that are just representing clients? And in fact, the very thing that they're doing against me and Rudy Giuliani and so many others. One almost thinks that maybe Trump did that action just to see what their reaction would be and how hypocritical they would demonstrate it to be.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is unconscionable. And what you see now, though, I'm curious your thoughts on this. There's some good things happening right now, as you referred to, where you can see the turning back of the tide a little bit in the legal profession, where obviously they were making it essentially illegal, right, or unconscionable or unthinkable. You'd be punished if you stepped out of line. So, I mean, I'm seeing hints of that. I'm hearing hints of that across the country since the Trump win. What do you see in terms of, all those issues, like whether you can work pro bono, for the side that most of the country agrees with now or not? And it looks to me like it's rolled back a little bit, but I don't want to be, too optimistic.
Well, I am looking forward to a future unburdened by what has been. But unfortunately, the prosecuting attorneys in a lot of these states, I'm indicted in Georgia and Arizona, they didn't seem to get the American people's memo from the last election. Mm-hmm. And they're doubling down on their prosecutions. Fani Willis continues to prosecute the case against me in Georgia, even though she's been disqualified. It's rather stunning. It's almost as if they think, well, they had Trump's scalp in their grasp and now they can't get it. So they're going to prove they could have gotten it, but for the stupidity of the American people in electing him. So they're going to get mine instead and show that they could have gotten Trump's as well. That's their mentality. But 2 weeks ago, a very important thing happened up in Colorado. Tina Peters, who's now been convicted and sentenced to 9 years for making a copy of the election records as required by federal law when they were about to be destroyed. She's now in prison for 9 years, and they wouldn't even give her bond. This 70-year-old Gold Star grandmother wouldn't give her bond pending her appeal of those ridiculous charges. So the Department of Justice weighed in, supporting her bond pending appeal. But it went further, and it said, by the way, we're putting the court on notice that we are criminally investigating the prosecutors and the judge in that case for violation of fundamental constitutional rights. That's a huge shot across the bow of these prosecutors that are going after their political opponents. And I believe it evidences that Kash Patel at the FBI and Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice are not willing to let this stuff slide under the rug unchallenged. And they're going to aggressively look at what's going on.
Well, John, we've had you on the show before for birthright citizenship. You're one of the nation's foremost experts on this. We know that we have the Trump executive order and all the courts are trying to fight it. So where does it stand right now?
Well, the Department of Justice has filed an interesting move in the Supreme Court asking for judgment ahead of any Court of Appeals decisions, but limited to the nationwide injunction aspects of the current injunctions that have been issued, which is itself a separate but very important issue. Keep an eye open. You might see a brief coming from me in the next day or two, weighing in at the Supreme Court on that issue as well.
Well, I have heard the grapevine why you are in D.C., at least for this evening, and it's not a top secret event. You are going around the country showing people your movie. Right? Is this correct?
I am.
With our friends at CPI, the Conservative Partnership Institute. So tell us about this and how people can watch it.
So, a group called the Madison Media Fund out of Hollywood. By the way, they're a nonprofit trying to push out conservative stories and documentaries to get the other side of the view that beyond what Hollywood normally puts out. They created this film called The Eastman Dilemma, Lawfare or Justice. I like to point out it's not my dilemma. I had never any dilemma at all in standing up for free and fair elections. The dilemma is in the colleagues in the legal profession on whether they're going to sit idly by and watch this lawfare go on, or whether they're going to stand with me trying to do something about it. But we premiered it in the Virginia area last night. The world premiere was 2 months ago down in Mar-a-Lago with President Trump and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in attendance. We're going to be in D.C. tonight at Conservative Partnership Institute, and then a third showing in the D.C. area tomorrow night down in Alexandria. And people can visit my Legal Defense Fund site, givesendgo.com/Eastman, and the details on each of those events are there and how to RSVP. They can also watch it. It's currently free streaming until the platforms put it up on the paid platform. It's available for free at eastmandilemma.com. And I encourage everybody to watch it. Make movie night out of it and invite your friends and family, get some popcorn and watch this movie and get angry about the lawfare that's going on so that you contact your representatives and tell them to do something about it.
Absolutely. Everybody definitely should go watch that. And we'll be looking out for the latest on the birthright citizenship that you're going to have coming out in the next couple of days as well. That was a good tease, John Eastman. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
When we come back, we'll unpack how VA Secretary Doug Collins absolutely shredded CNN after this. Are Democrats trying to make the Signal group chat leak into the next Russiagate? CNN's Caitlin Collins couldn't talk to Secretary of Veterans Affairs Doug Collins about anything else, even though it had nothing to do with it. Here's how Doug Collins handled it.
I do have questions about the veterans, but given what we saw with the group chat and how this was used, you are a member of the cabinet. You obviously know these other members, several of them who were in there. Is this typical for the cabinet to have conversations over Signal? Is this something that you use?
Well, Caitlin, Senator, you undoubtedly do not want to talk about the VA. I have a question as VA Secretary. As cabinet, I want to ask you, because I've been curious about this, because my job is to take care of veterans, and I would like to know why CNN is hostile to veterans, especially one in Florida where you just had a $5 million defamation suit taking offense at a veteran who was trying to help people. In fact, one of your employees actually said, we're going to nail him. I have a question for you, Caitlin. Is that employee still employed? Are you really concerned about veterans? So if we don't want to talk about veterans now, you want to talk about everything else, I'd like to hear from CNN as the Veteran Cabinet Secretary why CNN seems to have a problem with veterans.
Seems to be a pretty reasonable take there from Doug. Matt, what's your take on this?
I like Doug. As soon as I see that, I say, I like this Doug guy. Look at this. I love the fire he was giving. I love the look in her eyes when he was ranting. They can't give this up, and we can talk about that a little bit. I mean, the reason they can't give up the story is because it does resonate. It does. I mean, it does resonate with people. How can the people at the very top, right, Secretary of Defense, National Security Advisor, be on a Signal chat group just like everybody else is? And people sort of think that there's a lot more, secret movie stuff going on than there is, especially when people want to talk outside official channels. So they think that they have something here. And remember, they haven't actually scored a point on anything yet. I mean, they really haven't. So they want to keep throwing this around. Now, I don't actually think it hurts the administration in the way that the media thinks it does. But there's a problem here that the administration needs to solve and move on from. So this is exactly the way to handle it, though. You should never allow them to dictate the question or the framework. And Doug did a great job.
I love it because Doug kind of reminds me of Representative Tim Burchett. Not only do they have the Southern accent, but they're both attacking CNN, which we certainly do love here. And Tim Burchett is definitely known for doing that. So with the time that we have left, I'm not even going to set this one up for you today. You are going to do this all on your own because this is going to be a fun last few minutes of the show today.
This is very meaningful to me. It's a very sad day. It's a sad week, really. And, my fellow Americans, I'm here to tell you why. And the reason why is there's a man, a very intelligent, well-lettered man, by his own admission, named Jason Stanley, that I want to talk about today. And he's decided to leave this country. And it's a day of mourning. So I want to describe to you who he is and why you should be sad with me that he's leaving. Jason Stanley started out on Twitter throwing out shade and getting into arguments with many different people. And I think this is the first big one that he put out, where he described how he was a very accomplished professor. So if we could put that out there, this is Stanley's initial tweet that sort of, spread throughout different parts of the internet. Jason Stanley has written 5 books and almost 50 articles in half a dozen academic disciplines. Some of them among the most cited in the last 20 years. I'm in 6 departments, and I am stunned by the arrogance of folks with zero intellectual outfit pontificating about wokeness in academia. And he went on in that thread to basically say no one should be talking about BLM if they don't have the credentials that he did. This is a guy who talked about how, hell yes, he was self-important. He is important. Show them that one. People are like, he regards himself as self-important. No effing S. I would regard myself as an abject failure if Jason Stanley didn't write a book that people read in centuries. Who is Jason Stanley? Well, let's roll the tape. Let him tell you himself.
I'm the Jacob Jurowski Professor of Philosophy at Yale University and the author of 5 books, most recently, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them. What is success? You can be successful at many things. You can be successful at counting blades of grass. Is that success? It isn't success. I'm the Jacob Jurowski Professor of Philosophy at Yale University and the author of 5 books, most recently, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them.
That, my friends, is Jason Stanley, who is a professor at Yale University, lest you forget. He will remind you. Now, there's a funny thing about Jason Stanley that we all noticed very soon after he entered the scene and started announcing his deep wisdom and credentials. And there were moments like this. He talked about his self-importance, but he also bragged about how his students had higher SAT scores than he did. At one point, he said, I think my SAT score was 1280 combined or maybe 1260. I've never had a student whose SATs were as low as mine, which, is interesting, maybe even amusing. But then there were also moments like this when he started to attack people, myself, Chris Rufo, many other people, many of us who know each other. He would at least engage. And this is one of the classic moments in which he engaged. Tim Carney, great guy, said we need to teach natural law in the public schools. And yours truly, Matthew J. Peterson, said it's not enough to ban CRT, critical race theory. We must replace it with natural law, sort of making a joke about the way they would say it's not enough to be against racism. We have to do something positive. And immediately, Jason Stanley, who is a professor of philosophy at Yale University, by the way, said white Christian nationalism. Teaching natural law would be white Christian nationalism. After all, he wrote a book on fascism. I got the book. I was actually excited at the time to get the book because I thought, oh, maybe he's an interesting guy. He's got something to say about fascism I haven't heard before. It's not just going to be a bunch of the same tropes leading up to the same conclusion, which you out in the audience who don't have PhDs, unlike me and Jason, would never understand, which is something like this. Everything the right does is fascist and Donald Trump is a fascist and we should all be afraid. No, that happened. So he actually called teaching natural law white Christian nationalism, and a bunch of people came in and pillared him. And then this happened many times. The beautiful thing about afterwards, when myself and others just gave it to him, is that he did the right thing and he left. I mean, show him this. I wasn't tired of winning when this happened. Stanley would come out and attack us with storm and dudgeon, big philosophy professor. And then after this natural law comment, for instance, he said he's going to lock down his account, focus on his family and work for a bit. This was a failure. I wasn't tired of winning, but I was very happy for him because I thought it'd be great for him to go back and work for his family. And so did many others on the internet. This happened multiple times. He would kind of pounce, right, and attack, and then he'd get slapped down pretty handily, and he'd go away. And he became a symbol for many of us of not just the midwit, but the failed elite credentialer, right? The failed elite credentials, the sorts of people that we're supposed to respect, but that we didn't anymore. And the sad thing is, he has actually decided to not just leave Twitter like he has in the past, he's now going to leave the country. And if you can see here, he's announced that he is moving from Yale to Toronto because he won't raise his kids in a country that's tilting towards a fascist dictatorship. And to that, I first say, with Donald Trump at McDonald's, goodbye. But I also say, we raise a glass to you, Jason, because we're all going to miss you. We miss your verve, your humor. We miss your arrogance. We miss the way you run away and come back for more. But if you are leaving, I hope you take everyone who agrees with you with you.
I'm going to miss this segment. That might be the best 6 minutes that you ever done.
I can do this anytime. Just let me know.
I love that he went through, and this is, of course, the leftists being as self-important as we think that they are. But when he went through and said, you can be successful at counting the blades of grass, that really stuck out to me.
I mean, deep thoughts with Jack Handey. But this guy, I mean, he was the classic example, right, of the professor who overreached and was overwrought. And, I think he had some stability problems. He'd come and go. And so this weird thing where I'm happy he's leaving and he has the courage of his convictions. He should take more with him. But also, we're all going to miss you. Rufo's going to miss you. We're all going to miss you.
Anyone else on the left that wants to leave and join him up in Toronto, we will welcome that, and we will highlight you on the show as well. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll be back here tomorrow night.